So I was browsing through my vault today when something caught my eye. Salvation's Grip. I remember this thing being...
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
So I decided to pull it out today and do some testing with it, and I put it back in my vault. Most of you know what I'm talking about, but for those of you that don't, this is the Salvation's Grip. This weapon's charged projectiles create a pattern of stasis crystals on impact and freeze nearby targets. So nothing new with that. But when we go over to the other trait, Shatter Shot, this weapon's uncharged projectiles deal bonus damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets, rapidly destroying multiple stasis crystals. Reload this weapon from reserves. So just how much damage does this thing do against frozen combatants? Well, from testing, it got a base damage of 17,037, with that being its main base damage. And it has some side damage as well from a shatter effect of 4,431 damage. Now, if you can get a target frozen by any method, whether that be a grenade, a different weapon, even holding down this weapon's fire mode to freeze targets, and then you shoot it with a normal attack, it's going to do 22,360 damage, which is roughly around a 31% damage increase, as well as its shatter damage doing 5,816 damage. So then I decided to add the Mask of Bacchus, which for those of you who don't know, its exotic perk is Light Shift. Replace your stasis subclass dodge with a longer range, faster moving shift that partially cloaks you during use. After shifting, your stasis and arc weapons deal increased damage for a short time. So the main part of this perk that we're using is that last part, which increases our damage for stasis and arc weapons. The damage increase is around 25% and it lasts for 10 seconds. And during those 10 seconds, you can't recharge your dodge. So once the 10 seconds is up, your dodge will start to recharge after that. So it just adds another 10 seconds to your dodge cooldown. And yes, all of this stacks up. So dealing damage to a frozen target plus making your stasis weapon deal extra damage from Light Shift is going to increase your damage from the 17,037 all the way up to 27,950 main damage with 7,269 shatter damage, which is a 64% increase. This will also stack with debuffs like Tether, which will increase the damage even further, but I'm not sure if it stacks with a well. Let me know down in the comments below if you know. And while you're down there, you might as well hit that subscribe button. So how can we get the most out of this thing? So first off, we need ways to freeze enemies. Our first way is Withering Blade. Tossing a stasis shuriken at a target will slow them and add a 60 slow stack to them. You need 100 slow stacks in order to get a target frozen. The Withering Blade has 2 charges, so just throwing 2 Withering Blades will provide 120 slow stacks, which will freeze the target instantly. So that's one method of getting frozen targets, as well as our grenades. All of our grenades can freeze targets, and the Glacier Grenade can actually reload the weapon. If you throw the Glacier Grenade and shoot it with your salvo, it'll reload your salvo, but I've come to find that the Dust Field Grenade is way better at freezing targets and can keep refreezing targets, so it's overall better for damage output. To help out with our Withering Blade, we're using Grim Harvest, which will create stasis shards whenever we defeat a slowed or frozen target, and these shards will grant melee energy when you pick them up. We're also combining that with Elemental Charge in our boot armor, so whenever we pick up a stasis shard, it's going to have an escalating chance to give us an armor charge, which armor charges are useful because we can get weapon stasis surge, and we can deal even more damage with our Salvation's Grip. Make our Withering Blades even better, we're using Whisper of Hunger, increase the melee energy gain from picking up stasis shards. As for our other aspect, we're using Touch of Winter. This is going to make our Dustfield Grenade have a bigger radius, as well as create a stasis crystal on impact. As for our other fragments, we're using Whisper of Shards. Shatter a stasis crystal, temporarily boost your grenade recharge rate, shattering additional stasis crystals, increase the duration of this benefit. With one heavy shot, it only consumes 1 ammo, and it can create a bunch of stasis crystals, so it's going to allow you to get your grenade back pretty quickly. Whisper of Refraction, defeating slowed or frozen targets, grants you class ability energy. This is going to help get our dodge back back as soon as we're done with that light shift buff. So this does nothing until that light shift buff is over. Whisper of Hedrons dramatically increases weapon stability, weapon aim assist, weapon airborne effectiveness, mobility, resilience, and recovery after freezing a target with stasis. Pretty much always going to be freezing people with this build, so you'll always have the extra mobility, resilience, and recovery going at all times. Therefore, you don't have to put stats into them as often. If you want resilience, then you can still have high resilience just in case you can't freeze a target, but you should always be able to freeze targets, which is going to give you around, I think, 60 points to each of them, so you can focus your stats into discipline, intellect, and strength. And finally, Whisper of Fissures increases the damage and size of the burst of stasis when you destroy a stasis crystal or defeat a frozen target. Now for our other weapons, you should be using a stasis weapon and an arc weapon. It's just gonna allow your helmet to be more useful for other things. I'm using a Riptide with Chill Clip just so I can have extra methods of freezing targets, which is gonna give me that stat increase as well as make my salvation script deal more damage to that target. And for my energy weapon, I'm using a Kilos SMG with Bolt Shot. You can mix and match your weapons, but I prefer having a chilled clipped weapon for my kinetic weapon. As far as your artifact goes, the only things you can really utilize here are your melee authorized and arc authorized mods, as well as counter charge, gain a stack of armor charge when you stun a champion if you're doing higher tier content, and maybe even the deeper origins and overcharged armory if you have those type of weapons with the origin traits. Now straight into our armor mods. At the helmet, we're using our typical siphon mods to gain orbs of power for rapid final blows with stasis and arc, as well as hands-on gain super energy for melee kills. There's a high chance our withering blade will create that melee kill. In your arms, you should be using heavy-handed to create orbs of power for your melee final blows, as well as melee kickstart. Whenever we use our melee energy, we're going to gain melee energy. And focusing strike grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a melee attack. So once your light shift is over and your class starts to recharge and you use a melee attack, it's gonna give you some dodge energy back. In your chest piece, it's up to you. Just use whatever resist you need for that activity. In your legs, you should be using reciprocation to gain health each time you pick up an orb of power. Elemental charge, like we talked earlier, to collect stasis shards to give you armor charges, and those armor charges are going to go towards the stasis weapon surge to let our stasis weapons do more damage. In our class item, we have Outreach, reduces melee cooldown when using your class ability. Powerful Attraction, whenever we use our class ability, we're going to collect all the orbs of power nearby, so we don't have to run and go collect them ourselves. We can just dodge and we'll collect them all. As well as Reaper, whenever we do dodge and we get a kill, we'll create an orb of power.